ask you, in this race, it's when I feel like when it gets to the top of the ticket, even though a lot of people aren't paying attention as close as they want to, might not even know as much what the Attorney General does. So first off, I wanted to just ask you, tell us what your office does. What have you been doing the last 4 years?
Well, we've been so busy, and listen, I know that there's a lot that's been in the news, right? I mean, we had a once in a century pandemic. We had, threats to our governor. We've had threats to our democracy. So I know it's hard to pay attention sometimes to some of the more, I would say, mundane ministerial acts of government. But at the Department of Attorney General, we've been really busy just protecting everyday Michiganders. So our elder abuse task force, we have put into motion some really novel pieces of legislation and also acts by law enforcement all across the state to better protect seniors. And because of our good work, there are hundreds, thousands of Michigan seniors who otherwise might have lost their life savings who haven't now. And maybe that's something they don't know about, but they sure would have known about it had that happened. Or our ability to investigate acts of abuse or neglect or economic exploitation against seniors significantly diminished because of the great work that we're doing at the Department of Attorney General, trying to assist seniors and make sure that they're not being taken advantage of. We're helping workers around the state. We have our payroll fraud enforcement unit, so that if a worker has been taken advantage of, let's say a contractor or their company isn't paying them their proper pay, they're being ripped off with their benefits or their wages or their tips, there's a place for people to go now. And you can simply call up or you can fill out a form and we ensure that you're getting paid what you ought to, or that you're not being misclassified. You're not being called an independent contractor if you're actually an employee who should be getting full medical benefits as well as retirement benefits. We're working to make sure that people have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink. We've filed PFAS cases all around the state of Michigan, and in fact, in my own backyard here, we have filed suits against some of the major, landfills that have been polluting our air. When people's water or their air is at risk, we take action, and we've been very successful on that front. We've run in over $800 million back to the state of Michigan due to the opioid epidemic and the fact that the pharmaceutical companies caused, havoc on people around the state by distributing a product in a fashion that they knew was unsafe. And many, many, many people died as a result. And so we're allowing for treatment of people who otherwise wouldn't be able to do that because of these gigantic settlements. So there's all kinds of things that we're doing at the office. Maybe it's not as clickbait worthy, it's not as interesting to people, they are not paying attention to it, but it is impacting their everyday lives.
So if you're defending Michiganders, protecting them, why does it make a big difference who the Attorney General is if you guys are just following the rules and defending and as the law dictates?
Because so many of these are my own initiatives that we didn't have before at the department and we do now. I mean, the payroll fraud enforcement unit, the hate crimes and domestic terrorism unit. We have white supremacy organizations that were militarized, that had assembled huge arsenals, that were planning and plotting to kill massive numbers of people. And those are people who never died because those people are now sitting in prison. Those are the kinds of things that maybe you don't notice because no one ever died. And that's great. That's your government protecting you. But so many of these new units that we have in our office, they weren't there before I got there, and they won't be there if I'm not there anymore. And two words that you've never heard my opponent utter at any point during the course of his time running for office: consumer protection. That's my main mantra. That's what I talk about over and over and over again, how we are protecting consumers. And I don't care if you're a Democrat, an independent, a Republican, whoever you are, you need to be protected against bad actors that, commit price gouging, or are taking advantage of you in one way or the other. That's what we're there to do, is to protect consumers. And whether you are a senior, whether you're a worker, whether you're a student, we protect people against efforts to, perpetrate fraud on students that have loans who are eligible for student loan forgiveness. I mean, this is just an everyday thing we're doing to protect people, and we're going to continue to do it for the next 4 years. But not every attorney general has been so vigorous in their protection of consumers around the state. And some of my predecessors didn't do that, and I think that if I lose, my successor won't either.
Now, you brought up your opponent. You're in a race where you have a major lead in money raised, a major lead in name recognition. He's literally going through investigations. A lot of people don't even know who he is, but the race is tightening. Why do you think that is, and what can you do about it in the last 2 weeks?
Sure, Eric, it's exactly what you just said. The reason why he's polling well is because people don't know who he is. When you have over 70% of voters who don't know who that candidate is, then they might be more likely to vote for him. And they, a lot of people now, they just sort of look at party affiliation and that's it. And I would really urge your viewers to explore who my opponent is a little bit more. He is incredibly extreme on the issues in a way that I don't think we've ever seen anyone before who's run for such an important office. I mean, on abortion, it's not just that he wants to prosecute women, doctors, nurses in events of abortion, even if there's rape, even if there's incest. But with him, it's even if it would compromise the health of the woman to proceed in a pregnancy. Even, he has said, if a woman will die as a result of her pregnancy or during labor, he wants to prosecute any doctor who would terminate a pregnancy. And he said very plainly, there is nothing more important than the life of a fertilized egg, not the life of a woman. That's too extreme. That's not how women in this state want to live their lives, knowing that at any moment if they become pregnant and then there is a terrible complexity to their pregnancy and they could die, that the Attorney General will just let that happen. I'm running against a guy that wants to criminalize birth control. He compares Plan B to illegal shipments of fentanyl. This is a guy who so does not believe in democracy that it's not just that he brought the Antrim County lawsuits that were so unsuccessful and that even people like Bill Barr, the former Attorney General, said were absolutely ludicrous and completely lacking in merit. He's still trying to decertify the results of the 2020 election today. He still believes that Donald Trump won, and he will do everything in his power to make sure not just that we relitigate the 2020 election, but that if Donald Trump runs again in 2024, that he has declared the results or the winner of our elections, whether or not he actually receives the most votes. I mean, that's not somebody who we should have as Attorney General. It's my job to uphold the will of the people, irrespective of who they decide to elect. It's not my job to pick winners or losers. It's just my job to make sure that all the legal processes are properly followed and that the election is properly certified, irrespective of who wins. And it could be a Democrat or a Republican who wins. That's not my choice to make. It's a choice of the voters, but it is my job to uphold whatever their will of the voters is and whatever they decide.
Now, a lot of people on the other side would say you're extreme as well, and I mean, your personality is probably a reason why you won the first time around. Is there anything that you've regretted doing, saying, the things that they hold against you now as points throughout the past 4 years?
I think to take something that I've clearly said in jest and pretend that it's a policy point is really just a lack of policies on the other side. If you look at the things that we've done in our department the last 4 years, I'm very proud of our record. We just got our 7th conviction in our clergy abuse investigation, right? Hundreds and hundreds of cases that we thoroughly investigated. We're going to be releasing on Thursday the results of our Marquette Diocese investigation. We'll be releasing all of the 7 dioceses in a full report. And we're bringing justice to the lives of people who have suffered in silence for so many years, with people not believing them when they talked about what had happened to them. That's justice. Those are the kinds of things that we're doing. Investigating the Boy Scouts of America and bringing justice to the many victims of people who were involved in that organization. Protecting victims of domestic violence, protecting children who have been abused. I mean, this is what we've been doing at the office. We've been doing it consistently, and we're going to continue to do it. We're just protecting everyday Michiganders. And that's what I think people want from the Department of Attorney General. My opponent, this is a person who stands with the Proud Boys and the 3%ers. If you're a person who's been charged with having participated in the insurrection at the Capitol, he'll stand by your side. That's not what people in the state of Michigan want from the top law enforcement official in the state. People want someone who's going to protect them from civil unrest, protect them from mayhem against their government, not side with insurrectionists, but that's who Matthew DePerno is, and that's who he's always going to be. He does not stand on the side of law enforcement. I'm in court today. My attorneys arguing in regard to the case against the Wolverine Watchmen. Remember, these are individuals that sought to murder members of law enforcement. Yes, they wanted to murder the governor, and they wanted to murder many other politicians, both Republicans and Democrats at the state capitol, but also they wanted to kill law enforcement. Why in the world do you think that you can be the top law enforcement official in the state, but also side with people that actually want to execute members of our law enforcement? It's outlandish. And I don't think that when people learn about Matthew DePerno, they'll actually want to support him at all.
And then I want to ask, because you also brought up abortion. We have Prop 3 that's going to on the ballot. If it passes, it's going to have probably a lengthy legal battle after that as we figure out all these particulars. What kind of role does the Attorney General make? Maybe there's people out there that support Prop 3 are questionable about you, but is the Prop 3 they think they're voting for not going to happen depending on who's the Attorney General?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you go out and you vote for Prop 3, thinking, great, I'm going to protect rights to abortion, birth control, fertility treatments, and the management of miscarriages, and you think that those things are important, and most people in Michigan do, but you vote for Matthew DePerno, it's like you're throwing your vote away, because he's not going to defend Proposition 3. He has bragged about the fact that he wants to do everything he can to undermine Proposition 3 because he believes, again, that abortion should be prosecuted, even in the event where a woman is going to die if she doesn't receive an abortion. He's not going to defend Proposition 3, and we know that it's going to be challenged. I, however, will. I will vigorously defend Proposition 3 to make sure that it does become part of our Constitution so that we can protect the fundamental right to autonomy, to bodily autonomy that we've had in this country and in this state for nearly 50 years. Matthew DePerno's not going to do that. He doesn't even believe in it.
And can you just quickly give me like some insight on the things that are going to be challenged? Like when people read that, I mean, we keep hearing the parade of horribles, the worst case scenario, 14-year-olds with their chiropractor. But like, it seems like we're going to get everything ironed out later, either by the legislature or the courts. So what, like, are these details that are going to come down to the courts at some point?
Well, I mean, we'll wait to see what those challenges are, but we saw one of them already, right? I mean, you had these two individuals that were unelected members, of course, of the Board of Canvassers, the State Board of Canvassers, who said, this shouldn't be in the Constitution because we don't like the spacing. We think there's not enough spacing between the words. And so people can't possibly understand what this means. Well, of course, the 800,000 people that signed on to that ballot proposal so that it could actually become part of the ballot this fall, you know, they didn't have a problem understanding what it was. But it's something as insignificant as that it's likely going to be challenged. What's going to happen if Matthew DePerno is Attorney General and he says, I agree, so stipulated, there's not enough spacing, I'm not even going to defend this law? It's questionable as to whether or not Proposition 3 could even become part of our Constitution if that occurs. And I want to remind viewers, you know, there was a case that went to the United States Supreme Court that originated from the Proposition 8 case from California, which was the same-sex marriage case out there. And when it went to the Supreme Court, because the Attorney General refused to defend that law, it did not create marriage equality across the state or across the United States because they said the proponents didn't have standing. The Attorney General had to defend that, and the Attorney General in that case did not. What happens if Matthew DePerno is the Attorney General and he says, I'm not going to defend Proposition 3? Will it become part of law? It's anybody's guess.
All right. Anything else?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of some other stuff. You guys, what's that?
The utility.
Oh, that's right. I want to talk about, you know,
Oh, and
in terms
exactly.
of
I mean, especially
consumer,
line 5.
well, consumer protection, though. I mean, protecting ratepayers is such a fundamental part of that role. And the thing was, Frank Kelly, for the 37 and a half years that he was Attorney General, he took that role very seriously. Not so much after he was gone. So we reinvigorated that. Our Special Litigation Division challenges each and every time that a utility tries to raise rates. And we do that because we think the rates are already too damn high. And in Michigan, you know, ratepayers, you know, pay some of the highest rates with some of the worst service. And that's why we challenge it each and every time, and we have now saved ratepayers over $2 billion just in the last 4 years. Now, I know it seems like rates are already too high, but the fact of the matter is they would be a whole lot higher if it wasn't for the hard work of my office, and we're not done yet. We're going to keep trying.
All right.
Sure. Talk about guns. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about extremes, right? I am an opponent who has said that there should be no restrictions on guns whatsoever. That the Second Amendment doesn't allow for any restrictions. Nothing. I mean, that means people who are convicted of domestic violence. Those means that the people who have been convicted of very assaultive crimes should be permitted to have weapons. He doesn't believe in any age restrictions involving weapons. He doesn't support really basic laws like universal background checks or safe and secure storage, just telling, parents or guardians that you have to keep your guns locked up when children are around so they can't get a hold of those guns and, use them by accident or even intentionally. We look at what happened in the Ethan Crumbley case and how different things could have turned out only if his parents had made sure to lock up that safe or really not buy him a gun in the first place, right? But my opponent doesn't believe in any of those things. He thinks anybody should have a gun anywhere, anytime, and we think that leads to an increase in violent crime in the state of Michigan. I've worked very, very hard to combat ghost guns. Now, what are ghost guns? Ghost guns can be ordered online. They come without serial numbers. It doesn't matter if you have felonies on your record, you wouldn't otherwise be eligible to have a gun, and you can assemble it at home. I think that they should be illegal, and I've been fighting vigorously to ensure that they are deemed to be illegal. Those are things that can go through metal detectors. I mean, it's incredibly scary. My opponent, Matthew DePernell, supports ghost guns, thinks they should be totally legal, there should be no bans on them whatsoever. That's a fundamental difference in opinion, and I think his approach really is to the detriment of the public, and I think that many homicides and other serious assaultive crimes could be prevented if we take ghost guns off the streets. He wants to put more of them on the streets.